My world almost shattered on a Wednesday morning, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a mouse. It happened when a single name glowed on my computer screen. A ghost from a past I had spent 15 years and thousands of dollars in therapy trying to bury. There it was, under the heading, Lead Systems Architect Applicant. My high school executioner, the very architect of my teenage desolation, was applying for a job. And I, of all people, was the gatekeeper. My name is Clara, and I'm the Director of Human Resources at Quantum Leap Dynamics, a powerhouse in the Silicon Valley software scene. It is a very good job. The pay is exceptional, the work is challenging, and more importantly, the position grants me a level of authority I once could only dream of. I build the teams that build the future. I am a judge of character, a curator of talent. I decide who gets a seat at the table. For someone who spent her formative years feeling invisible and utterly powerless, the appeal of this role is not subtle. My days are typically a predictable cycle of scanning resumes, optimizing keyword searches on professional networking sites, and wading through cover letters so full of corporate jargon they could sedate a bull. They are a beige, forgettable routine. Until that one. The name was Ryan Peterson. I leaned in, my half-finished latte growing cold on its coaster. A familiar, icy dread began to spread through my chest. It had to be a coincidence. The Bay Area is filled with transplants, but the details on his profile landed like a series of targeted blows. Hometown, Sugar Land, Texas. High school, Clear Creek High. Graduation year, the same as mine. And then the final, irrefutable piece of evidence, his alma mater, Texas A&M, the same university he had paraded through with an unearned swagger. The same campus I had navigated with my head down, trying to take up as little space as possible. My heart began a wild, frantic drumbeat against my ribs. It was him. Without a doubt, it was him. To grasp the vertigo this induced, you have to understand the Ryan Peterson of Clear Creek High. He was more than a simple bully. He was a master of psychological warfare, and I was his favorite battlefield. I was the quiet, nerdy girl who always had her nose in a book. I had braces until I was 17 and a pair of thick glasses I could never seem to keep clean. Ryan was the king of our little universe. He was the star quarterback, handsome in that effortless, all-American way, and possessed a cruel streak of charisma that made people orbit him, desperate for his approval. He and his pack of loyal followers had an uncanny ability to sniff out your deepest vulnerability and exploit it for public amusement. He didn't resort to simple physical intimidation. His methods were far more insidious. He'd steal my notebook and read my painfully earnest poetry aloud to his cackling friends at the lunch table. He'd mock me in calculus for answering a question correctly, calling me a tryhard, just loud enough for the back of the class to hear, while the teacher pretended not to notice. But the crowning achievement of his cruelty, the memory that still has the power to make my stomach clench in the dead of night, involved a boy named Mark Jennings. I had a crush on Mark so massive it felt like a law of physics. One Tuesday, he slipped me a note saying he thought I was smart and funny, and asked if I wanted to go to the movies that Friday. For 3 days, I lived in a state of suspended disbelief, walking on air. I felt seen. I felt normal. Then, on Friday, he approached me in the packed school courtyard. Ryan and his friends were perched on a nearby bench, watching, a pack of hyenas waiting for the kill. Mark looked at me, his face a mask of embarrassment, and said, loud enough for half the school to hear, "You didn't actually think I'd go out with you, did you? Ryan bet me $50 I couldn't get you to believe it. You're so desperate." The tidal wave of laughter that followed was a physical assault. It felt like it could shatter my bones. I carried that humiliation for years. It became a part of my identity. I went through college perpetually on guard, avoiding social gatherings, convinced that I was inherently unlovable. It took years of work, of consciously forging a new persona in a new city, to start feeling whole. I built this life, my career at Quantum Leap, my minimalist apartment in San Jose, my predictable, controlled routines, as a fortress to protect myself from that girl in the courtyard. And now, the monster who created her was knocking at the front gate, asking for the key. My first instinct was primal. It was a craving for pure, undiluted revenge. One click. The reject button beckoned to me like a siren. It would be so simple, so clean. He'd just be one of hundreds who didn't get an interview. He would never know it was me. The thought was a heady cocktail of power and justice. It felt like a balancing of the cosmic scales, a small, digital retribution for a decade of pain. But I held back. My finger hovered over the mouse. That felt too easy. It felt like hiding, like the same girl from the courtyard running away again. Then a darker, more complex idea began to form. I wanted to see him. I wanted to meet him face to face, on my terms. I wanted to look into his eyes and see if there was any recognition, any trace of accountability. His resume, I had to acknowledge through clenched teeth, was spectacular. His work history was a highlight reel of successful projects at top-tier companies. He had every skill we were desperately searching for. The professional in me, the director of HR, knew he deserved an interview. The wounded teenager inside me knew he deserved to squirm under my gaze. And for the first time in my adult life, that teenager was in the driver's seat. I bypassed the usual protocol. No junior recruiter, no preliminary phone screen. I scheduled the interview myself. I sent him a direct, formal email inviting him to our headquarters. I wanted him in my domain, sitting in the expensive leather guest chair across from my sprawling oak desk. I wanted him to be forced to look up at the woman he had tried so hard to make small. The morning of the interview, I felt like I was arming myself for combat. I chose my most formidable outfit, a sharp, black sheath dress and heels that made me feel powerful. I spent extra time on my makeup, a perfect red lip my war paint. I rehearsed my greeting in the mirror, practicing a look of detached, professional authority. I am in control, I told myself over and over. This is just business. But when my assistant's voice came through the intercom, "Clara, your 11 o'clock is in the lobby." A wave of icy panic washed over me. He walked into my office, and for a heart-stopping moment, I forgot how to breathe. He was older, of course. His hairline was receding, and he had fine lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and long hours. But the essence of him was unchanged. The confident posture, the easy, charming smile that never quite seemed genuine, the way he moved as if he owned any room he entered. He was still Ryan Peterson. I rose from my chair, extending my hand, my mask of corporate pleasantry locked in place. "Ryan, Clara Monroe, thank you for coming in." He shook my hand, his grip firm and confident. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Clara." And then his eyes met mine, and he truly looked at me. I saw it. It was a flicker, a micro-expression that lasted less than a second, but it was there. A subtle widening of his eyes, a barely perceptible tightening around his mouth. The smile faltered. He remembered me. He absolutely remembered, and a cold, deeply satisfying sense of triumph flooded my veins. The first half of the interview proceeded by the book. I grilled him on his technical expertise, his past projects, his leadership philosophy. He was impressive. He was articulate, knowledgeable, and polished, but he was also completely off his game. I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, the frantic effort to reconcile the successful, poised woman in the corner office with the awkward, bookish girl he once tormented. He kept fidgeting, his answers growing slightly less fluid, his confidence visibly eroding with each passing minute. Then I decided to go off script. "So, Ryan," I began, leaning back in my chair and steepling my fingers, my voice a carefully modulated purr. Let's discuss corporate culture. Here at Quantum Leap, we believe a person's character is just as critical as their skill set. Would you agree? He blinked, caught off guard. Oh, yes, of course. A positive and collaborative environment is essential for success. Good, I said, nodding slowly. And do you believe that people can truly change? Or do you think that, deep down, we are essentially the same people we were at 17? He saw the snare. His professional facade began to fracture. He ran a hand over his thinning hair, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. I believe people grow, he stammered, his voice losing its confident timbre. Life experience, it changes you. You mature. I see, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously soft level. Tell me, have you ever done something in your youth that you profoundly regret? An action that, if given the chance, you would go back and erase. The atmosphere in the room grew thick and heavy. He stared at me, his gaze locked with mine. The pretense was over. He knew precisely what this was about. He swallowed hard, the sound loud in the tense silence. It stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I had him. He was cornered, exposed, and humiliated in my office, on my turf. This was the moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. This was my victory. Yes, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. And would you care to elaborate on that? I pressed, savoring the exquisite power of the moment. He didn't answer right away. He just sat there, looking at me, the ghost of his past self at war with the man he was now. He was visibly sweating, his knuckles white where he gripped the arms of the chair. I had won. I had broken him just as he had once broken me. But then he did something utterly unexpected. He took a long, shuddering breath, and as he exhaled, the defiant tension seemed to flow out of him, replaced by a deep and profound weariness. Clara, he said, and my name on his lips sounded different this time. It was quiet, freighted with history. Clara Monroe, I remember you, and I remember what I did to you. I was a monster. I froze. This was not part of my fantasy. There's no excuse for how I acted, he continued, his gaze unwavering, the swagger completely gone, replaced by a raw, naked shame. I was an arrogant, deeply insecure teenager who derived a sick sense of power from making other people feel small. It was the only way I knew how to feel important. What I did to you, and especially that stunt I pulled with Mark Jennings, it was cruel. Despicable. I have thought about it many times over the years. It's one of the great shames of my life. He paused, his eyes falling to his hands, now twisted together in his lap. I'm not saying any of this to get the job. I'm sure that's not going to happen now. And I am not asking you to forgive me, because I know I haven't earned that right. I needed you to know that I am sorry. I am truly, deeply sorry for who I was and for the pain I caused you. I'm trying very hard to be a better man today. The silence that followed was immense. The triumphant feeling I had been chasing for so long disintegrated, leaving a strange, hollow ache in its place. The power I wielded over him suddenly felt cheap and bitter. I wasn't the triumphant victor in a long-awaited showdown. I was just a woman in a room with a man, both of us haunted by the people we used to be. The clean, simple narrative of my revenge had become a messy, complicated, and deeply human moment. I was angry that he had stolen my righteous indignation, relieved that his apology felt genuine, and overwhelmingly sad for the girl who had to endure him. I was completely lost. My HR training and my personal vendetta were equally useless. After a long minute, I cleared my throat. Thank you for your candor, I said, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. We will be in touch. He nodded, a look of grim resignation on his face. He stood, shook my hand again, his grip now uncertain, humbled, and walked out of my office, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there for a long time, staring at that door, the silence of the room amplifying the storm in my mind. I had no idea if I had just made the biggest mistake of my career or taken the first terrifying step towards a closure I never knew was possible. Life, however, is rarely so tidy. 2 days later, my carefully ordered world was thrown into a blender. My boss, a formidable woman named Ms. Albright, convened an emergency meeting of the senior leadership. One of our largest clients, a fintech giant, had just moved up the launch date for a critical security platform by 8 weeks. To compound the disaster, the lead architect we had just poached for that very project had accepted a last-minute counteroffer from our biggest rival. We were in full-blown crisis mode. We were understaffed, dangerously behind schedule, and at risk of losing a contract worth tens of millions of dollars. A palpable panic filled the conference room. We needed an expert with a very specific and rare skill set, and we needed them to start immediately. Ms. Albright's finger scrolled down a list on her tablet. What about this one? Ryan Peterson. His profile is a one-to-one match for the project's needs. Clara, you interviewed him on Wednesday, correct? What's the verdict? Every head in the room swiveled in my direction. It felt like being pinned by a dozen spotlights. My past and my present were colliding right there in that sterile, glass-walled room. This was it. This was the true moment of reckoning. I could end his candidacy with a single, professionally couched phrase. I had concerns about his collaborative style. He wasn't a strong culture fit. No one would ever question my judgment. I could bury Ryan Peterson and the painful memories he represented for good. The teenager inside me was screaming, pleading with me to do it, to finally deliver the knockout blow. But then I saw his face again in my office. The shame, the regret, the quiet appeal not for forgiveness, but for the chance to be seen as he was now. I heard his words, "I'm trying very hard to be a better man today," and a quieter, steadier voice inside me, the voice of the woman I had fought so hard to become, asked a different question. Who was I if I allowed the wounds of a 15-year-old girl to dictate my actions as a 33-year-old director? Was that control, or was it just another kind of cage? He's brilliant, I heard myself say, my voice clear and steady. Technically, he's the most qualified candidate we've seen in a year. I think we should make him a very aggressive offer immediately. A week later, Ryan Peterson started at Quantum Leap Dynamics. The first few weeks were a masterclass in awkwardness. I maintained a professional distance, observing him from the fortress of my office like a biologist studying a volatile new species. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. A condescending remark to a junior programmer, a flash of the old arrogance in a strategy meeting, anything. A part of me was desperate for it, for some justification for the resentment that still simmered just beneath the surface. But it never came. The man who walked our halls was not the monster from my memories. He was quiet, focused, and almost painfully humble. In meetings, he listened intently before speaking. He stayed late to help his team hit their impossible deadlines. He brought in bagels for everyone on Fridays. People respected him. He had a dry, self-deprecating wit that was the polar opposite of the cruel sarcasm I remembered. Slowly, reluctantly, I felt the glacier of my resentment begin to melt. It became increasingly difficult to reconcile the king of Clear Creek High with the man who patiently showed the interns how to use the complicated espresso machine. About a month after he started, we found ourselves as the last two people in the office, both working late to finalize a progress report for the fintech client. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken history. Finally, without looking up from his keyboard, he broke it. "I still don't understand why you hired me," he said, his voice quiet. I kept my eyes on my screen, not responding. "You had every reason, every right, to send my resume straight to the shredder," he continued, finally turning to look at me. "I wouldn't have blamed you for a second. I I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful, and I will not let you or this team down. Something inside me, a knot of pain I had carried for nearly 2 decades, finally came undone. I looked at him, truly looked at him, not as my tormentor, but as my colleague. A man in his 30s, with a mortgage and responsibilities, trying to do good work, just like me. And in that moment, a profound realization washed over me. I wasn't that scared, nerdy girl anymore either. I was a director. I was a leader. I was a survivor who had built a life she was proud of. His past actions hadn't been allowed to define my future, and I couldn't let them define my present. The apology didn't erase what happened, I said, my voice even. But it mattered. You're doing excellent work here, Ryan. Keep it up. He simply nodded, a silent, mutual understanding passing between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a truce. It was a start. Over the next year, a strange and unexpected peace settled. We became work friends. We'd occasionally grab lunch and talk about impossible project timelines and the nightmare of Bay Area traffic. I learned he was divorced and fought for every moment he could get with his young daughter. He learned I was training for a triathlon. We were just two people, two adults, sharing a complicated past and a demanding present. The scars were still there, but they no longer ached. The story doesn't end with a dramatic cinematic moment. It ends on a bright Saturday afternoon at the annual company picnic in Golden Gate Park. I was laughing with some colleagues when Ryan approached, holding the hand of a little girl with bright, curious eyes, who was clinging shyly to his leg. "Hey, Clara," he said, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "There's someone I want you to meet. This is my daughter, Emily." I knelt down to her level. "Hi, Emily. It's so nice to meet you." She gave me a tiny, hesitant wave. Ryan scooped her up, settling her on his hip and kissing the crown of her head. He looked from his daughter's face to mine, and then he said something to her that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "Em," he said softly, "this is Clara. She's one of the kindest and strongest people I know." I almost dropped my drink. If you had told the 15-year-old me, hiding in a bathroom stall to avoid the jeers in the hallway, that Ryan Peterson would one day say those words to his own child about me, I would have thought you were certifiably insane. But there we stood, under the California sun, two people who had been shaped in the same high school fire and had emerged on the other side, profoundly changed. My revenge was never going to be about his failure. I could see that now with perfect clarity. The ultimate victory wasn't in rejecting his application. It was in building a life for myself so strong, so successful, and so full that I had the capacity to witness another person's growth and make peace with it. It was never about forgiving him because he earned it. It was about letting go of the anger because I deserved to be free of it. And standing there, in that moment of quiet, astonishing grace, I finally felt free.